Welcome to the Body and Beyond podcast with Alice and Gina,
a podcast sparking discussion on all things health, mindset, fitness, goals, and motivation.
We strive to help you to boost your confidence, to take the lead in your own life, to back yourself, and to step into your full potential. Body and Beyond is proudly sponsored by The Seed Cycle. The Seed Cycle is a beautiful female-founded Australian company. Seed cycling is a natural methodology that you can use to support your menstruation and your ovulation, and it can even be used to support your hormones through perimenopause and menopause. Use the code BODY and BEYOND at the Seed Cycle website www.theseedcycle.com.au.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Body and Beyond podcast. I'm Gina and Alice is here as well. Good morning, Miss Alice.
Good morning, Gina. How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. We are up to episode 28 today, and we are going to be diving into dieting, deficits, and fat loss tips. And it's quite relevant right now, isn't it, for you? You are literally a week and a half out or 2 weeks out from your comp, aren't you?
Yeah, literally 2 weeks, well, just under 2 weeks out from comp. So we are at the very tail end of my current deficit fat loss phase. So I'm excited.
I bet you are. How are you feeling today?
I feel good. Honestly, it's kind of a weird, in a way, in a sense, I feel almost guilty for how good it's felt, if that makes sense, because I've done many preps before. And I think it's one of those things where, like, the more you do something, the better you get at it. And the more you've adapted and you're, kind of ready for it. So it's interesting. Like, my memory of my last prep is a lot harder and a lot worse than what I've actually experienced throughout this prep. And yeah, I almost feel like, it was almost felt like a bit too easy in a sense.
Yeah.
So don't get me wrong, not too easy, still challenging, but just, I guess, my way of saying it has been an amazing prep, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, like, about almost feeling guilty, but I guess dieting would be a skill as well for a competitor such as yourself, or for other people who compete a few times a year. It becomes a skill in itself, and you find out what works for you, what fills you up, what nourishes you, how much sleep you need, and then therefore the perception, wouldn't be as bad as the very first time you did in that situation. Yeah.
It's interesting you say the word perception as well, because that's something I do chat with my clients about, like perception, and I think like adaptation, basically, because sometimes when you start something, it can seem really, really hard. And then over time, like what once was like, oh my God, this is hard, you do adapt to it, and it becomes hard becomes a different level again. So adaptation is something that I always remind my clients as well, like everyone can adapt, right? So people who say, I will never be able to do that, or I could never do that, they're looking from a view of, like, from going from A to Z without all the little implementation of the middle ground of what it takes to get here. So for me, sitting here being like, it was quite easy, like I feel like I nailed this prep. How many preps have I done before? And some of them were horrible, especially the first ever ones, right? So, it's taken a long time to get there, to get to that. Yeah,
exactly. And it's actually really quite relevant to listeners as well who are looking to lose some body fat, because as well, I mean, I know the way you coach specifically, it's not always seeing fat loss as something that happens over one fat loss period. You might actually strategically allow it to take a year or 2 years, where you'll go into multiple fat loss phases back to maintenance, and really with health as a prime focus as well. So people, even clients of yours, I imagine, would have multiple fat loss periods within their time with you, and they would also increase their skill and perception of that fat loss phase.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think that's an important point as well, just mentioning phases and fat loss. I guess the overarching message that we're trying to also, keep in mind throughout this discussion is weight loss and fat loss isn't a lifestyle or a way of living. No one should be living in a diet or living in a deficit. And a lot of people do live with that mentality over many years. And it can merge into that kind of yo-yo dieting for some people, or it could merge into just constant or consistent under eating or binging for some people. So it's definitely like fat loss or weight loss is something you don't want to live in that mentality forever. It's something that you could do short term, but then maintenance really is where we want to be most of the time.
Exactly. And so with that in mind, what would you say a really healthy period could be for a fat loss phase? Would you say like 12 weeks, 8 weeks?
That's a really good question, because I think it really comes down to the client specifically as well. A ballpark, I reckon, if we were to think of a time frame in which you could get a good results at a moderate paced fat loss per week might be between, say, 12 to 16 weeks on average, I think. Or maybe even like, I would say 12 to 16 weeks on average. But when I say it depends on the person, like there are so many things that we have to consider. And this is something that I have to consider with people that come on board for coaching. And if they want or have a goal to do fat loss, is first we discuss like what the goal is, what the time frame is, and what your lifestyle is like, and what your relationship with food is like, before we kind of decide what approach is going to be best suited. Because some people might be better suited to going in and doing a more severe deficit for a shorter amount of time, getting in, getting it done, and then coming out sooner if that works for them. If there's someone who's very, and as much as we like to steer away from the all or nothing mentality, if someone is very like goal specific orientated and is really good at like just going in, knuckling down and really being disciplined and sticking to something for that time, that person might suit doing more of a mini cut type thing where they're really going in for like 6 to 8 weeks of a cut down and then going back to maintenance, right? But they might be in a more severe or a bigger calorie deficit. Whereas someone else who has more flexibility in their lifestyle, they've got maybe more of a social life, maybe they have kids, they've got a family, generally that like hard approach can be quite difficult to do in that lifestyle sense. So for those people, they might be looking at something more long-term, slow approach. So more flexibility, a calorie deficit that is not as severe. So they still got energy. They've got they've got kids, they've got a family, and they have to show up in life in that way still. We don't want them to be like suffering and dieting hard. So for those people, it might be honestly between 12 and 20 weeks that they're slowly doing a long fat loss phase. And then, of course, we have to take into consideration how much the person actually wants to lose in terms of fat loss. That will also play into it as well. So there's so many variations to it, right? And that have to be, suited to the particular person.
Yeah, exactly. And also like from my perspective, when I'm working with people, it also may be from an overarching healthy, nourishing kind of perspective. So looking at really educating the person on what is a protein, a fat, a carbohydrate, and helping them to make some swaps or some changes without going into necessarily a diet phase in inverted commas, but more so changing, making different choices and also fitting it in with their lifestyle. And then really, there's an opportunity there to see some great progress just from modifying the current way of living as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Gina, actually, because one of the very common questions that we get, or that I get, is do I need to track my calories to lose weight? And that's one of those annoying answers of it depends. Typically, I say, well, you want to know how many calories you're going to be eating in a day because that's going to determine the outcome, more or less. But where it gets a bit grey is where what you just implemented and what you said just then is it depends on the person. If they have quite a lot of weight to lose and it's been like many years of, having unwanted habits, being in a bad sort of lifestyle with a relationship with food, that person might have a lot more weight to lose ultimately than just doing small swaps, like you said, and making small habitual changes can be enough to start to get the ball rolling, right? Like they can start to see that result without too much of a change or an effort.
Exactly.
If we flip the switch and go to the opposite end of someone who's already maybe in quite lean-ish shape, or just wants to cut down a little to fit in to, an outfit, or to go out and enjoy a summer holiday, which is very common for people, right? Maybe they just, want to get a little bit slimmer, a little bit leaner for summer. That's going to take that little bit extra of sort of attention to detail. So for someone in that boat, it probably will be necessary to track your macros and calories to get the result, right? Because it's going to be harder for that person.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting, hey, because that's the thing. This is why it is so individual, and making sure you are working with a coach ideally. And there are some people who psychologically might have that all or nothing thinking, or might just identify as a bigger person, or there's so much going on. There's so much complexity to it psychologically, right? So it's about meeting the person where they're at, taking those gradual steps, and then when they are ready to then dial it in and get more detailed, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a classic example as well as why cookie cutter type programs and fad type diets maybe they do work sometimes for short term for some people, but overall, when we're looking at everyone as a population, they don't work, right? Because they don't take into consideration all of these things that really we do need to consider. It's just a one size fits all, and obviously that just isn't going to work for so many people. So yeah.
So when it comes to fat loss, first of all, we were going to cover tracking your intake, and you specifically work with obviously nutrition plans, and also some of your clients will use MyFitnessPal, won't they, for tracking? So yeah, what's your approach with that?
Yeah, I think this is the thing about coaching, right? It's very tailored. So obviously for those who really do want to get a result, but they don't necessarily want to dive into learning how to use MyFitnessPal to tracking all their macros. Maybe they've got a lot going on at the time. I have a lot of mums, people who are studying, and they just come to me and they say, look, I don't feel good. I want to get the result. I don't know how to track macros, got no idea about it. And so for those people, in order to kind of get the results straight away, that's where I'll offer my menu plans in the app, right? So it's already pre-calculated for them. I can see the macros, I can see the calories, they can see the macros and calories too. But ultimately they're following off menu plans that all have the calculations pre-done for them. So all they need to do is basically follow off and go for it. And then at least, at some point down the line, the goal being to eventually teach that person how to then merge into a more flexible dieting approach and learn how to track their own macros. So that's the other option that I do have as a coach, is some of my clients are experienced with this, or semi-experienced. They know a little bit about it. So they will track their food, their calories and their macros in an app like MyFitnessPal. So once I give them their targets that they're hitting, I also have a flexible dieting guidebook that will help them, and videos to help them learn how to do that properly. But more or less, they choose basically what's going to be easier for them in their lifestyle and what's suited to their goal at the time, whether they want to do menus or flexible dieting. So for me personally, during comp prep, I've done a flexible dieting approach, but the first time I prepped with my coach, Melissa, and I didn't really know too much about, comp prep as such specifically, and also comps that I did a long time, many years ago with you, Gina, as well, because you've also competed. Back then it was just menu plans, because I didn't have the knowledge around what sort of I was supposed to be eating. So, yeah.
Yeah. And when it comes to My Fitness Pal, it can actually be, even though some people may shy away from using it, or even the thought of tracking, and it can be a bit overwhelming for people to start with, can't it? But that's okay. I mean, it's part of the process, and I think it can be a little overwhelming for every single person when they first start using it. It's breaking through that first barrier of this first week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is. And then it becomes almost like when you get a new phone or get a new program you need to learn. It's just learning how to use it. And then the human brain adapts and gets quite efficient at it, right? And I was just going to say, like, it can be quite insightful for individuals once they start to track to see, oh, okay, so if I choose that, that might be, wow, that's that many calories or that much fat. Oh, I didn't actually know that, versus that. Okay, well, that actually fills me up more, and it's lower in calories, higher in protein. So it can be a really great education tool, even though there's the flip side of the one camp that might say that tracking is obsessive and, unhealthy, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, anything can be taken to extremes, but I think it can also be used as a great education tool. So people can be like, yeah, wow, or I can start to see what my meal is made up of, or what that burger actually has in it, or what this meal contains, so it's such a great tool.
Yeah, I agree. And like the saying goes, knowledge is power, right? So how people have that power and being able to steer the direction of their goals if they don't understand food and what's in food. And so of course I agree, there are going to be situations out there where tracking might not be suitable for someone, especially if they've had any type of sort of eating disorder or anything like that. But that's a very specific kind of issue, in my opinion. And so more or less, I think at some point, people understanding how to track food, you don't have to track food forever, but knowing how to and giving it a go can, like you said, it just opens your eyes to what you're actually putting in your body and what different foods look like. So if you do go back to more of an intuitive style of eating, you do definitely have more of an understanding of what food is going to serve you for what purpose, and how much of something that you should sort of be eating as well. So
and it's interesting as well when it comes to people who potentially have had an eating disorder in the past. And I know this podcast is on fat loss, but sometimes for that kind of individual who has had some problematic relationships with food, sometimes for them to actually be tracking at maintenance or in a slight surplus with goals around muscle growth or goals around health, like just eating at maintenance, they can actually almost start to undo some of that, that programming, or some of that behaviors from the past, because they're actually fueling their body and looking at hitting minimums, like they're hitting minimum target goals for their different macronutrients. So rather than being I need to be smaller, fat loss kind of mindset, they're actually in a fueling my body, nourishing my body, and hitting minimum targets mindset. So it can also be beneficial in that way for many people.
Yeah, that's so true, Gina. I've actually had a client specifically who did that, who did come off the back of an eating disorder. She was quite young and just was scared of food, basically. She had a fear of food. But it's funny, actually having the goal to focus on and knowing that that's okay to eat that food, that's her maintenance, that's what she should be fueling with. It kind of helped her mentality, being able to see that on a screen rather than being worried, like, should I be eating this? Should I not be eating this? I shouldn't have carbs. So yeah, you're exactly right. It can work in opposition for some people, for sure.
Yeah.
And
often for a lot of people, it's best to start at maintenance, right? Fuel your body, start at maintenance, and then move into a fat loss phase. So for anyone listening who's considering losing some fat, you'll often find if you do work with a coach, you'll be at maintenance to start with, then moving into fat loss. You don't just go straight into a massive deficit.
Exactly. And it's important because you don't want to cut yourself too short either. Like, you don't want to take a stab in the dark and start someone in a deficit that is way too low, that they just didn't need to be there in the first place, right? You want to know what their baseline is first before you make the decision of where you're going to start the deficit anyway. So that is quite an important thing, I think, from a coaching point of view. The other thing I wanted to say in terms of tracking, and something that I find, I'm having these conversations with a lot with clients, but when when you do MyFitnessPal or macro tracking, a lot of people confuse that with sort of tracking as you go, right? In a sense that they're trying to get the result, but they're just tracking food as they go, and they find it quite stressful, right? Because you get to the end of the day and you go, oh my gosh, this is not adding up. How do I get this last bit to add up? How do I do this in my last meal of the day? And the idea around tracking your macros, and something that I'm quite firm on with my own team, is you have to be organized, and you have to be,
planning ahead.
And planning ahead. Yeah. So when people say, I don't have time to do it, it's too much, like it's too stressful for me. Literally, like what I do and what I've done through every single one of my preps is sit down on a Sunday, I plan out a menu. If I have a client who wants a little more variety, maybe they can plan 2 menus for the week. But either way, you sit down, you plan that menu, nail the targets, and then that is it. You do not need to go back in there through the week to do anything, unless you've had something come up, you need to alter something, then you can do that. But it should be like easy, set and go. Like plan your menu, nail the targets, prep the meals, and then that is it. You don't need to stress about it throughout the week, right? So it really should be taking that stress away from worrying about, oh, what do I need to eat? How am I going to fit these macros for the last meal of the day? You don't want to be doing that, because that then does become a bit stressful.
Yeah. So what you're saying is plan it out and then almost copy the meals across each day. Or not? Are you saying not even? Sometimes with clients, they might not even log every day in MyFitnessPal. They just know what they're hitting for the week. Yeah,
exactly. Like I have got a log on a Sunday, basically, of what my meal plan is for the week, and then I kind of prep my meals for the week, and then they're all ready to go. I sometimes refer back if I've forgotten like a measurement or a portion size or something, but other than that, it's all ready to go. The meals are prepped, and you don't really need to log every single day, because you just know that you've got the menu plan set there.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you're someone who wants more variety in your food, then just do a couple of menu plans. So you might do like Monday to Wednesday, you're going to have this, then Thursday to, Saturday, you're going to have this menu. But either way, just organization and planning in advance is definitely key.
And once again, like specifically what Alice is referring to is when someone's committed and they're in a fat loss phase, right? Whereas when it's lifestyle outside of a fat loss phase or eating at maintenance, there might be a similar structure that you apply each week, but it's not going to be as regimented or as strict necessarily as when someone is like committed to a fat loss phase.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more room for flexibility at a maintenance as well, because we're not machines, remember. It's not like you go 50 or 100 calories over today and, oh no, you're going to gain 100 grams of fat. It's not how it works. We definitely have a buffer zone as humans. We have that buffer zone, and our bodies will adapt to sort of keep that homeostasis. So often it naturally does so. In, say, if someone eats like a bigger meal or something, your metabolism might kick up the next day and you're more active, you're moving around, it knows, right? You've got more energy to burn. If you eat a little less the next day, your body will automatically start to conserve energy a little more. Your NEAT levels will come down. So your body is very smart, right? And so that is why you definitely have that buffer zone in maintenance. And so when you think of maintenance, you also don't need to think about, if your maintenance is 2,000 calories, you have to eat exactly 2,000 calories every single day. You definitely don't need to eat 2,000 exact calories every day. It's more or less give or take around that, though. And that's going to be fine for a maintenance phase. But when we talk about a deficit or fat loss phase, then you definitely want to be making sure you're staying in a deficit on a daily basis to get the result, really.
To achieve your result. And that's the thing, right? It's each individual. It's their call, it's their choice, it's their goal. And then the coach will adapt around that for sure.
Exactly, yeah.
Next up, some tips around high volume foods. So when someone is in a deficit or a fat loss phase, like what recommendations do you have for making meals appear or feel bigger?
Yeah, well, I mean, everyone says like salads are boring or, that sort of thing. I honestly could not be further from the truth. Like I have enjoyed the tastiest meals during my prep that have been so high in volume and are so delicious. And normally I do go for when I say high volume, we're thinking of foods that you can eat a lot of that are very quite low in calories. So, vegetables, salads, things that really beef up your meal sizing, because they will keep you satiated and they will stop you from ending up in those, wanting to binge eat or snack. So the other point is I've just lost my words. More whole foods, I should say, less processed foods, because as a typical kind of, I actually have this example in my coaching notes for my clients, but if you go to get a protein cookie, like what is it? Those, I think they're like Larry's or Lenny's cookies.
Or like My Muscle Chef.
Yeah, like you look at a cookie about that big, and that thing is over 400 calories for a cookie. And so you think to yourself, like, if you're going to eat that as a snack, and you're going to be hungry in another hour later probably, because it's not going to fill you up, or you could have a meal that is 400 calories that's going to keep you full for hours. It's going to have lots of volume in it, and less kind of fillers, because when I say fillers, normally the processed foods, they'll be high in calories, and a lot of those calories will basically just be things that you don't really need in your diet, right? So
things like seed oils, things like preservatives.
Yeah. So definitely you want to try as much as you can to stick to, I would say, like whole foods kind of diet if you can, in a deficit. And, people think that it's to do with like, oh, it's just going to be boring, I have to eat salads. But trust me, it helps big time, because if you want to, you could lose weight eating a burger a day, or eating a chocolate bar. Totally fine if it works for you and you feel like you can hold that out and you're not getting hungry, but from experience and doing many diet phases, it doesn't last long before you start to feel the hunger pains kick in.
And it's interesting what you said about taste as well for the salads or the veggies, the high volume foods. So I wanted to touch on that as well. So recommendations around ways to flavor and just give a bit more flavor and zest to meals.
I definitely have a few favorite fat loss phase sauces and spices for sure. Like I definitely have the cupboard of diet phase tools, right? So there's a couple things that I love. Like I'll normally use any spices. Obviously, any spices are fine, really. But things like, there's a low calorie sort of sauces that you can get. Like there's I think it's a sweet chili sauce, and it's like a light version. There's literally like basically no calories in that at all, as opposed to a regular sweet chili sauce, which actually has a lot of calories in it, a lot of sugar.
Heaps of sugar, hey? Like I think if you look at the bottle, it's like 70% sugar.
Yes, and it tastes exactly the same. I kid you not.
Yeah,
so it's like, you wouldn't want to be wasting your calories on a high sugar, high calorie sauce when there's literally an option that is like nothing in it. It adds nothing to your calories for the day. So that I love a bit of like sugar-free maple syrup on like anything that needs sweetening, like
even like having like salt and pepper and a little bit of sugar-free maple on, even on a veggies or a salad, is just delicious. Yeah,
exactly. You can get so creative with these things, and trust me, I do during crop prep. So sauces like that, definitely just look for like sugar-free kind of ranges, because generally they will be like low calorie type sauces. I think like Walden's Farm does, that's like a brand, I think that's quite well known. They do a lot of like minimal calorie sauces, marinades.
Those ones full of like weird artificial preservatives
they
and
do
stuff.
Have artificial stuff in them, and so that is the downside that we also need to. But it depends. You've got to weigh up like what at that moment in time, how long is it going to be for, and what the goal is. So, and
I guess there's also ways to kind of create your own, right? Like you could even put like a little bit of water in a cup, salt, pepper, a little bit of like lemon juice or lime juice, a bit of mustard, and kind of create your own zesty dressing as well.
Yeah, exactly. Or like a stevia or any of those kind of things can help too. I literally had cinnamon and stevia on cucumbers the other day. It was actually really good.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, lots of little tips and tricks that you can do in terms of sauces and flavoring. You've got to get creative. Mustard is a good one too. Mustard, if you're a mustard girl, I'm a mustard girl, but it's very low calorie. Tabasco, I like Tabasco. I think like some chili sauces if you like a little bit of spice.
Yeah.
Things like that. Yeah.
Delish. What else? What other recommendations do you have around getting into a routine? So obviously we've spoken about getting into a routine with like your food. What other factors come into it when it comes to fat loss?
I think timing as well, in terms of meal timing, is also important. I personally notice that when I have consistency in my routine, both training times, making sure you time your meals around, training when you're going to need the energy, those sorts of things are important to ensure that you're staying consistent, and also blood sugar stays consistent as well throughout the day. You don't want to be going like long stints or doing a training session, then fasting, then eating, because often it's those things that can kind of let you down, in the sense that you might then end up going for the sweets or binge eating or something like that. So I think staying consistent throughout your day, having your meals timed, so every 2 hours or whatever it is that you eat, and your body gets used to that. Training timing, trying to stay consistent with your training time. Consistency is key for everything, I guess.
And also knowing your body. So if you're the kind of person who's hungry in the morning, then like directing meals closer to the morning, or if you're hungrier in the evening, making sure there's not big hours and hours where you haven't timed yourself properly.
Exactly. And I think that's another point to mention. Intermittent fasting is quite a common thing that people do when they are in a fat loss phase, but it works for some people and it does not work for other people. Personally, myself, I don't think it works well, and I have tried it, in the past. When I've done it at maintenance actually, and it's been fine. It worked really well for me when I was doing my PT days, just in terms of lifestyle. But basically the point being is that some people might only eat within certain hours. So they might fast from the morning until lunchtime and squeeze all their calories into the back end of the day. And for some people that works really well, right? Because you're eating less calories and you're staying full. And a lot of the time that afternoon, evening is when people tend to get a bit peckish, right? So having more calories in that time can help some people. I think for other people, having that fasting period in the morning when you're already in a deficit, getting to lunchtime and then being ravenous, sometimes they can just, go crazy and go off the hook from there, and it just doesn't work for them. So just keep that in mind, like do what works for you, I guess, in that sense. The other thing is if you're training, if you're performing in the gym, you don't want to be fasting, after training sessions or anything like that. So personally for me throughout prep, fasting is not ideal, because I'm wanting to continually fuel my body and make sure that I'm not going to lose muscle mass as well, and I've got enough energy to train. So consistency throughout my day is really important. Eating my meals spread throughout the day evenly has always worked the best for me. So each to their own though.
And another really important thing is to not rely on cardio. Hey, when in a fat loss phase, so not trying to create your calorie deficit through output or through physical activity as a standalone thing, really making sure the nutrition is the key factor. And then of course you can add activity in around that.
Exactly. I think too many people rely on cardio as a tool for fat loss, and that's another whole topic altogether, right? But you see people often punishing themselves as well through exercise from food choices. And it doesn't work out that way anyway. Like eating a 250 calorie chocolate bar is not going to be the same as going to the gym next morning and punishing yourself on making yourself do 250 calories on the treadmill. It's not like, it doesn't equate that way, right? I think people think like, I ate this many calories, so I'm going to burn that many calories off. It's not how it works. The human body is definitely more complex than that. And so I think it's just an important thing to keep in mind. Don't rely on cardio, because at the end of the day, you could lose weight without doing any exercise at all. And that's the truth of it. And I think even when I do have clients, a lot of the time, if they're extremely busy with families or studying and working multiple jobs, they stress a lot around not being able to get in their gym workouts, and almost using that as the excuse for not being able to get a result because they haven't done their workout for the week. So, I can't achieve weight loss unless I've exercised. And that's absolutely not true at all. It's just about, managing that energy balance and only eating the amount of food that you need to eat for the amount of exercise output you are doing. So I am 2 weeks out from stage now. I have no cardio. I haven't had cardio since last week. I don't have cardio this week. I've been doing some morning walks to get out, but it's just like, I know competition prep athletes who do zero cardio throughout their prep. So it can be done for sure. Yeah.
Very interesting. And what do you think the main key factor is for that for you personally, that you're in this position you're in now compared to previous competitions, previous preps?
In terms of not having to do too much cardio?
Yeah, not creating more of a deficit through cardio.
Well, I guess it can be a couple of things. Like, number one is definitely food compliance and nailing macros consistently, and just being in enough of a deficit that you don't have to do that. And the off-season prep. So, you hear about making sure that you do a proper maintenance phase so that you don't have to drop your calories down too low in order to get into a deficit, which is also the key thing. Because if someone, and there are plenty of people out there who unfortunately aren't at the best metabolic place when it comes to the fat loss phase. So they're having to drop their calories very low, let's say 1,200 calories to be in a deficit. And then in order to then further get more lean and get to stage lean, they then also need to add in cardio on top of that, because that's what you got to do. It depends on your own body, really. So
really it comes down to the work that's done in off season, the work that's done at maintenance, training hard, increasing muscle mass, and then you benefit from that later. And that's relevant to everyone, right? Our listeners as well, anyone who's wanting to, improve their body composition. When you are in maintenance phase or in a surplus phase, like really dialing that in and really working hard and putting in the work. And then if you do choose to do a fat loss phase in the future, it'll be even more fruitful, I guess, based on the work you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, let's not forget the importance of weightlifting over cardio anyway, if we're talking about long-term metabolic improvement and overall body composition improvement. The biggest bang for your buck is to continue resistance training. Like, that is where you're going to get increased lean muscle, aside from all the other health benefits, obviously, that
many benefits. Yeah.
If you had to choose one or the other and your goal is weight loss, I would go with resistance training, honestly, because you're still you can still build your cardiovascular fitness with weight training as well. So yeah, absolutely.
And there's so many benefits. We've obviously gone into those throughout the whole lifetime of the podcast, but so many other benefits that aren't just to do with how you look, right? Your stability, your strength, your confidence, your balance and joint health. There's so many benefits that have got nothing to do with the way someone looks.
Absolutely. One other little thing to remember on cardio specifically as well is, don't forget that a lot of the time the low intensity or long cardio can really, really increase your appetite as well. So, if someone's not tracking food at all and they're just relying on cardio to lose weight, and I've heard it happen many, many times before where people are doing this, they're slogging themselves doing an hour of cardio every morning and they're gaining weight. Like, how the hell does that work? Because they've just done an hour of cardio in the morning, and throughout the day, their appetite has now, gotten increasingly higher. And because they're not tracking their intake, it's not something that you're aware of, right? You're just eating in response to what your body's telling you. I'm hungry, I'm hungry, I'm hungry. So people don't realize they're eating more food So they end up just working in opposition to what they're trying to do. They're going to the gym, they're trying to lose weight, they're going to do cardio for an hour, and they end up eating more food and in fact not losing weight at all, or even gaining weight in some circumstances. So
yeah,
it's a point to remember.
And I think the same can be said for people who do too much high intensity interval training. So circuit style training sessions, or, intervals, certain amount of seconds on, certain amount of seconds off. It's really fatiguing, and you reach muscular fatigue quite rapidly. And those kind of styles of training sessions as well can increase the metabolism, increase the appetite, which is kind of one of the selling points of doing it. But if the person, like you're saying, if the person goes and then refuels with those extra calories, then you're still in the same position.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of like what I just said, your body knows what you need, right? So in some cases, it might end up people eating in a surplus. But in most cases, it'll be that your body is just exhausted, and it'll upregulate your appetite, and you'll be eating more, and you won't know that you're eating more. It's just an automatic kind of response. But you'll think you're doing the same thing when really you're not. And so, yeah, that again is another reason why it can really going back to point one, help to track your intake.
Yeah. And that's specifically when it comes to someone who wants to lose some body fat, that may not serve them. However, if someone is in an athletic shape, they're satisfied with the way their body composition is, and then, if they're training harder, eating more, that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If they're really, that's probably a healthy thing, that they're fueling themselves. So again, everything we're saying is context dependent, but it's more so when someone wants to lose weight, they think they're doing the right thing and they think they're doing all these things, but really it's working against them. And that's where it can be beneficial to get some professional advice in that setting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think fat loss in general, if you want to set a goal, and if you want to achieve that goal, set the boundaries, set the timelines, be specific with what you're trying to achieve, okay? Don't just go in and be like, I just want to lose some weight. And have no timeline, no measurements, no accountability as well. You need to be, in my opinion, checking to see whether you're achieving anything. It's like setting a goal, but then, not checking in to see whether you're achieving it is pointless, right? You're just living in the mentality of being in a diet when you're not executing what needs to be done to actually get the results. So
yeah. And that's a massive point of most of our points across the podcast, isn't it? It's like, if you're healthy and nourishing and fueling your body as a priority, if you're in a fat loss phase, just do it and get out. Yeah. Rather than being in this half-assing diet mode, and not really, it's not good for health necessarily. It's not optimal for health.
Exactly. Yeah.
So to finish off the podcast, we want to go through some low-calorie or diet foods, as well as gut health, and then how social life and weekends can come into the situation as well. So let's start with looking at low-calorie or diet foods. Now, normally we don't suggest these as part of making up a big part of your nutrition or your diet for health reasons. However, when we're in a specific fat loss phase, they can be a good tool, can't they?
Yes, exactly. And you nailed it, Gina, because, if we're talking about, we can probably do a different podcast on maintenance, right? But if we're talking about maintenance, long-term health, then this is something that I probably steer away from. But specifically for short-term, for fat loss, there's definitely a couple of tricks that you can use, just like kind of the low-calorie sources we were talking about earlier. Personally, I do like diet sodas. I know like a lot of people don't, but for me, like I love a Diet Coke or a Coke Zero. And, there's no denying that it will definitely, there are some studies out there that actually say that they could sort of increase your appetite somehow. Personally, I definitely feel the opposite. If I'm kind of in between meals in the afternoon and I'm like really struggling, I'm like really hungry, first and foremost, I will go for like just sculling a big thing of water, trying to get the water in. If I'm still feeling it, then I'll probably go for something like a Coke Zero. And like 80% of the time, like once I've had a Coke Zero, I'm fine. I'll just go into my next meal. The other things that I love are zero sugar Powerades or Gatorades. They're so tasty, and they've got electrolytes in them as well. So those ones probably even better than, grabbing a Coke Zero, but still, again, something that I would only have in a diet phase.
Yeah, especially when you're at the pointy end of your comp prep as well. It's just like those little extras just keep you a little bit happier.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Also, like I'll talk about like low calorie ice creams and sweets, which there's plenty of those. Jar of hot chocolates, 40 calories. We use Adrenal Switch, Gina and myself, which and EHP Labs has also just brought out a new nighttime oxy sleep formula, which is like similar to Adrenal Switch, I think, which is basically a hot chocolate with magnesium, that sort of thing. Diet jelly. I've definitely been using the diet jelly during my prep because I just love raspberry jelly, and I have it in the fridge. So you know how when you're hungry, sometimes you open the fridge and you just look around, and then you close the fridge, and then you're
like, what's in here?
What's in here? If I ever find myself doing that, I've got a little bowl of diet jelly in the fridge. There's like no calories in it at all. So I'll just have a little spoonful, and then like that kind of like does that little, it gives me that little, I've had something, and then I'm done. I don't need to look in the fridge again.
I'm glad you've mentioned like Adrenal Switch and also the EHP Lab. So we get our subs from Elite Supplements, but basically like late at night, to say you want something sweet right before bed, then having something like Adrenal Switch. I love the choc mint version. I know you've got that one as well, but it's just like having a hot chocolate that's just something a little bit sweet, but it's also got all of those beneficial magnesium and ashwagandha, so other supplements that are going to help you actually rest and fall asleep and stay asleep and recover overnight.
Yeah, I actually I really rate that because it also keeps it, like, it does give you that feeling of satiety at the end of the night too. It like fills you up a little, so you don't feel like you need to reach for anything else. If you're someone who is a sweets person who tends to do that in the evening after dinner, and I know a lot of people who do, that's when they have their downfall for the day. Something like that is perfect. You can also get like single serve low calorie ice creams, or like Halo Top sticks and that sort of thing. My advice from a dieting point of view is never buy a tub of anything. Always get single serve. Something that you
game over. You know when it's done.
Exactly. So yeah, lots of little things that you can do there. And I guess that moves into just keeping gut health a priority, because that is also important. And we have to be aware that things like artificial sweeteners and a lot of low-calorie foods can, in some instances, cause a little bit of discomfort in people's gut. So be aware of that. I've definitely tried some low-calorie things before, like wraps specifically. I've had a couple of wraps before. I can't remember the brand of them, but and I can't remember exactly what it was that was in them, but holy hell, like I would have a wrap. It was great because it was like so low in calories, and I was like, yes, this is amazing. And then my gut would be like screwed for the next 3-4 days, like getting back to normal. So I'd never touch it ever again, especially on prep, because you don't want to have to deal with that. Being regular and having your digestion working regular is important for fat loss as well, and nutrient absorption. So you still want to keep that in mind for sure.
Yeah, so important. And that's why as well it's so important to be eating whole foods and rice and things that are going to give you fiber and allow you to have some bulk to actually pass, compared to sometimes when people are dieting and eating low calories, low volume, their stools might not actually be enough to pass through, and that's where issues like constipation can come in as well. So it's so important to make sure you're getting the bulk in, like we were discussing earlier, lots of veggies and whole foods to keep the system moving.
Yeah, and I normally think of that as a bit of for most of my clients as well, maybe, on prep it might be a little different towards the end, but most of the time I would say greens are free for all, like load up on it. Salad, like lettuce, if you're having a salad, cucumber, Zucchini. I love zucchini. That's probably my favorite green veg, and I'll just add it into pretty much any meal that I can just to bulk up the meal. And yeah, definitely tracking that fiber intake to make sure I'm hitting that fiber intake every single day. Makes a huge difference. And from someone who does do like an extreme prep diet, making sure that your regular is like really a priority, because it can stall weight loss, it can stall fat loss, and progression on the journey. And when you're on such a time sensitive journey and you're trying to get to a point by like, this is it, you need to be ready. You want to make sure those things are ticking over regularly. So fiber is,
we're excreting like feces and urine and sweat, like that's how the body's actually metabolizing, getting rid of toxins and getting rid of fat and expelling it from the body. So it's really important. And also water comes into that as well, right? So staying hydrated and making sure you're getting adequate water to not only help your digestive system flow, but also just for cognition and training performance and fat loss in general.
Yeah, 100%. I think as well, like one like major tip that I could also give to anyone is if you find something that hits the spot and works well, don't change it. Just stick with it, be consistent with it. And that's, throughout prep, I've tried a couple of menu plans throughout my prep, specifically this 16-week fat loss phase that I've been doing, where I've tried something like I did in the earlier day. I had that like low-calorie bread, for example, or I've tried different dinners and it just hasn't quite hit the spot, either with satiety, I'm hungry, or my digestion's a little slower. It's not quite ticking over regularly as I would like. And so, if I find that with a menu plan, I will alter it. And then, in the last sort of probably 8 weeks, I've really nailed a menu plan that has literally hit all the marks, right? So I'm not hungry. I love all of my meals. Digestion is great. There's nothing that's making me bloated or anything. And once you find that, you stick with it. And it's just about consistency and rolling with it. That's the fastest way you're going to get the result, right? So, yeah.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And then finally, we wanted to touch on socializing, weekends, and how important it is to take them into consideration when you're in a fat loss phase and do the best you can to adapt. So tips around that, Al?
Oh, I know. This one's a tough one. It could be a long one, so let's try to keep it short.
Yeah, we'll keep it. This is the last thing.
Yeah. So look, social life, weekends. The first thing that you want to take into consideration is what is the top priority for you? Is it to get to this goal? Do you need to get here? Or is being a part of, having a social life, connecting with your friends and doing that also very important to you at that moment in time? So obviously you need to weigh that up a little bit. In saying that, you can have a social life and still get a good result. I've had a social life. I've been to engagement parties. I've had Gina come and stay. I've been out to dinners and that sort of thing throughout my prep, and I've still been able to enjoy it. So it's just about making the right decisions and setting boundaries, I would say. You set your boundaries for that week and for that event. And
it doesn't have to be one or the other, right? And these are conversations I've had with my clients recently as well. Have a game plan, like if, for example, if at home you're having a certain type of protein, to say you're having veggies and potatoes and chicken for dinner, that's your normal meal. You can replicate a very similar meal if you're going out with your friends. So just because you're in a diet phase, it does not mean you have to be antisocial and stay at home. Absolutely not. You just need to, like you said, have boundaries, know what your focus is, and order accordingly. And you can still have those beautiful times with your friends. You just might not be eating the pizza they've ordered. It's just going to be a slightly more dialed in meal, which is going to keep you feeling satiated and nourished as well.
Exactly. So that would be probably the number one thing. Make the food choices that are best suited to your goal. And there's always, trust me, I've been to restaurants that are like, just completely high calorie type foods. And if you ask them, sorry, my camera just went off, didn't it?
It just froze, yeah.
If you ask them, they will find something for you to have. They've always got something that people are very, Where do we go? There we are.
Yeah, gotcha.
They're always happy to cater. So ask, could you just do some chicken breast, or could you do some fish and some vegetables? Could you do an extra serve of vegetables on the side? Don't be afraid to ask restaurants and ask waiters if they can do this for you, because most of the time they can. The second thing that I'll mention is calorie saving. So it is a strategy, although that I would not, typically say you want to do this often or long term. But again, if your goal is to get to that goal and you've got to make sacrifices, you might implement intermittent fasting on days where you know you're going to have a higher calorie event or something. Yeah. So you might just not eat until lunchtime. You might have lunch and a snack, and then you've got an event on. And at the end of the day, that's probably going to help to keep you closer to your deficit line than if you were to just eat a whole day and then have the event on top of it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then thirdly, minimize alcohol as much as you can, because they are empty calories. We call them empty calories because they're just calories, and they're not adding anything beneficial to sort of, aside from enjoyment. If you're having a wine or something, you could track it though into your calories. But other than that, if you're out, having diet soda, or I know at the engagement party I was having lime and soda in a wine glass. It looked nice, and I still felt like I was drinking alcohol, to be honest.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think so good. And the other thing I wanted to add is when you're ordering your like slightly modified meals with a waiter, make sure as well, if you just ask them not to cook it in, to soak it in oil or butter as well. Just asking them to just do a steam, that can also help. Or if you're having grilled food, just saying, can I have it grilled rather than fried in a pan. So just being clear with your instructions as well. Don't feel bad about that. Just make sure you speak up.
That stuff's actually the hidden, like that's where the hidden kind of stuff is, in the oils and the sauces. Exactly. I mean, like, it's funny because Warren and I went to, when we were going to the mall like a couple of weeks ago, he actually went and got just some chicken from Subway. And we thought we would just look up the ingredients just to see. And we were both shocked. We were so shocked at what chicken breast had in it at Subway. Like, we were just like, maybe it's got a little bit of sauce or something or seasoning on top. No, this was like a full-on paragraph of ingredients in plain chicken breast. Insane, like just all the preservatives that were used in there. But it's just kind of a message in to say that, like, that's the difference between having a home-cooked meal and eating out in general. So even if you are ordering very often at home and you think you're probably ordering something healthier, like Subway, for example, don't be fooled, because there's a lot that you might not be able to see on the surface that's still added into those foods. And if you're eating them very often, it will obviously have an impact.
Yeah. And also remember as well, when you're dealing with a chain like Subway or a bigger chain that they have systems, then of course, like, I mean, what I'm imagining is that Subway potentially has lots of bits of chicken breast, chicken thigh, bits and bobs, some preservatives, some potentially fillers and breads. And then they almost make like probably a big roll and then cut that up, and it looks like
it looks
cut
like
up. Whereas if you're going to your local cafe and you know that they're grilling chicken breast, that's going to be a different scenario, right? That's going to be closer to what you're replicating at home. So
it's just being aware of those little things. They definitely do. And please feel free to go and Google what's in Subway chicken breast.
Is that the one you said to me the other day as well? Was it Subway we were talking about?
We were actually comparing the Macca's chicken breast and the Subway one, and we were surprised there was less in the Macca's one than there was in the Subway one.
And it kind of looks like a chicken breast, because I'll often get a Macca's chicken breast if I'm on the road. It's $3. It's awesome. But it kind of looks, you can kind of see the muscle fibers, and it looks like it's a fillet, it's a piece, compared to when something is just chopped up, you just don't know what's in it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Look, there's not an issue. And like I was saying to Warren, it's fine. It's like, it's one of those things you do when you're on a road trip, you've made like a better decision. It's going to make a huge difference, right? But it's more just like the awareness of it and thinking like, should you do that every single day, or should you make that your daily habit, or should you eat this takeaway meal every day, even though it's healthy? probably look a little closer, a little further into it, just to make sure. Yeah.
Cool, guys. Well, that's it for today. If you have any specific questions, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to inbox us on Instagram or join our Body and Beyond community on Facebook. So that little community is growing. So we'd love to have you in there. And that isn't, honestly, like, I created it so you have an opportunity to ask questions, to put forward topics for the podcast as well. So don't be shy there as well.
Yeah, that would be amazing if you could. Cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
See you guys. Have a great day.
The Body and Beyond podcast is for information purposes only. This podcast does not constitute advice or services, and the statements and views of the hosts and guests are not medical advice. The information provided should not be used for treatment or diagnosis purposes. Please discuss any information from this podcast with your healthcare professional before making any changes to your lifestyle.